Okie dokie. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the session on proposals. Um, I do plan on keeping this fairly interactive after a brief uh, kind of introduction, because I guess I almost had a laugh out loud when I saw the idea of how to write a great proposal, because to me, the greatest proposal is one that never gets written. Um, and what I mean by that is I really try during my fact finding to get so many things lined up that it really makes any proposal kind of academic. In fact, for the last several years, everything that I've tried to do and everything that I've tried to coach people on, whether it's my own clients or whether it's our colleagues and trusted advisors, is really almost eliminating the word proposal from your vocabulary and instead think of a memo of understanding. And the reason why I make that distinction is in order for us to write a memo of understanding or an MOU in shorthand, you have to have an awful lot of those details worked out. You have to know how many participants we're going to have. You have to know what you're going to cover. You have to know, are we going to do it on a Tuesday or a Thursday? Are we starting it at 9 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Is it going to go every other week, or is it going to go every week, or is it going to go every week for the first 3 and then every other week after that? Are we going to talk about having this all in written form, including the text and the action plan, or are we talking about purely using LMS or are we using some kind of combination? So is part of my fact finding, up to and including, by the way, how's the stuff going to get priced and what kind of terms are we going to be talking about? I treat those as all part of the fact finding discussion. And the reason why I do that is I don't want any variables to enter into the process of saying yes. And so as I'm going through the discovery, and we're kind of honing this down into almost kind of talking them through options, to me, it gives the whole idea about being an assistant buyer a whole new level, that we're really kind of helping them make decisions, and we're making decisions with them along the way, so that everything is literally just a compilation of what's already been agreed to in advance. I never, ever, ever want to have any surprises in a proposal, ever. It should just purely be, these are all the things that we've already talked to, and to my understanding, these are already ways that we've decided that we're going to proceed. That being said, let me screen share, if you will, several kinds of things that I've developed over the years as background. And I'm just going to take these one at a time. What you'll see here is I built kind of a template that if I need to go through this, I can. This is typically going to be used if I'm in a situation where it's a larger organization, number one. And number two, I believe that this is going to be a more complex or more complicated decision-making process, where there's people that need to kind of be brought into the fold, if you will, in terms of how this decision is going to be made. And let me clarify, I'm not talking about using this by coming into the middle of the organization and then selling up to the CEO. I'm still talking about using this with the decision maker, but knowing the decision maker likes to almost have a kitchen cabinet of people around them that they like to bounce ideas off with before they make a decision. Under the best of circumstances, if I'm on my game when I'm doing a discovery process or fact-finding process, I like to ask the person, When you're considering doing something new, who do you like to kick ideas around with? And once I get kind of that order of magnitude, 4 people, 6 people, something in that order of magnitude, I will usually say, would you have any objection, even if it's on my nickel, for me to have arranged to have a 15 or 20-minute conversation with them? I'm really doing this for 2 different reasons. Number one, I want to make sure that there's no major fact, if you will, that didn't come up in the discovery process that could really send this thing south. But the other thing is usually people that kind of are coming out of an operating area have some things that they've always wanted to get accomplished and never really had a vehicle to get them done. And they could see this training and development process, or this strategic planning process, whatever we're talking about, or process improvement process, or process excellence. They might see this as, this could finally be the vehicle that will allow me to get done what I want, that I've been trying to get done for years. And so I really pay attention to those kind of nuggets on the 15 or 20-minute phone call. I will also always want to share my bio information with them so that there's no question in their mind in terms of whether I'm competent to do what it is that we're talking about. And then when I put that into the final document, I want to make sure that their collective fingerprints are all over this document, that it really did show that I was listening to them, and their great ideas have been built into this process. So just to kind of walk you through it at a very high level, I make sure that people understand that it's draft, and I talk about that. Once that's said and done, we send a confirming memo of understanding that helps ensure that we're on the same page and that neither firm receives any surprises other than pleasant ones. I've pretty well stuck with the proposal format that you've probably seen as part of your fast start or agility training: understanding of the situation, management objectives, your stated desired outcome for management development. In this particular case, it would be a management development process. Our recommended approach and premise and methodology, and so on. Why what we do actually works, our support, anticipated timeline, proposed content, investment, and then basically why us. I've also, over the last couple of years, added this paragraph here as a confidentiality agreement. And let me give you a moment to read through it. I've added that because over the years, our colleagues have talked about less than scrupulous people basically taking our outline that we've put together along with our costs and handing it to somebody else and basically said, hey, can you do something like this? Now, I can't stop them, from being unethical. If somebody decides to be unethical, am I going to take them to court? Probably not, because it would cost me more in time, effort, and aggravation than it would be worth. But I'm trying to put that out there as just hey, we're dealing from the top of the deck on everything that we do, and we expect you to operate in the same way.
Hey, Doug.
Yeah.
If I may, it's Bob.
Yeah.
Looking at that with all your bullet points, there's a lot of bullet points there. And I'd imagine that each one of those bullets could require at least a paragraph or two of explanation. Is that about right?
Correct.
Okay.
This is actually a 17-page proposal, so I typically don't use it if I'm doing one-on-one coaching with somebody.
Okay. Thank you.
What you're going to see here is I'll use the balanced scorecard along with one section on general information for me to be able to capture what I've discovered as part of my fact-finding process. Kind of when the business was started and how many employees they have. And by the way, these are purely dummied up placeholders for you guys just to be able to give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I talk about different things. Kind of what's happening in the business from a financial perspective, what's happening in the business from a management perspective, what's happening in the business from a customer base or customer perspective, innovation and growth. But that's kind of my check sheet to make sure I've touched all the bases that I want to touch. And if not, there's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and saying, you know, we had a really, really good conversation the other day and we covered so much information. But when I was reviewing my notes, I realized there was one area that just never came up as part of our conversation. Could we spend 5 or 10 minutes talking through that? And I could even fill in that blank if I really thought that that was critical to the success of what we're talking about. Spot for placeholders in terms of how much do I really understand kind of what they're trying to do and what their metrics are going to be. And how clear am I in terms of the goals for the process? What does success look like? What you see here in terms of our recommended approach and premise, this is straight out of the book with little exception. Have I customized some of it over the years just for my own phraseology? Yeah. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward, just to make sure that there's no surprises and people understand what's going to be covered. The approach and the premise, management by commitment, and the whole idea. And then in talking about the success formula, I've done my own little variation in here. This is sustainable, as you can see down here. It all follows in terms of how it's all explained, but sustainable, improved results. The whole notion of business behavioral change. The P3G stands for personal, professional, and process improvement goals. And because I also do some work with the attribute index and intermetrics, I'll include the T for talents just as part. As I kind of scroll down, you'll see that I do embed my version of the life wheels in there, just to kind of, if I haven't talked about that during the fact finding itself, but quite candidly, most of the time I do. That's in there just to make sure that that visual is a strong anchor for where we're trying to go with this. The whole idea of tying it into spaced repetition and how much kind of tied into the early childhood negative conditioning kinds of stuff. The 88% below the subconscious conditioning. What methodologies can be used? I talk about, the impact versus the discovery versus the I wonder moment versus spaced repetition. And again, so much of this is right out of the process sale manual that you have. Why what we do actually works. And so here I'm kind of walking them through the various adult learning methodologies that we have, the implementation sessions, the spaced repetition. If you use rotating leaders, that gives you a great opportunity to do that as part of the breakout groups. Practical real-world application, built-in motivation. Then how does the stuff become internalized? Then depending on what pre and post testing and evaluations I choose to use, I'll typically include those down here in terms of how kind of talking about those kinds of things. And this one here, updates of progress with whomever you designate to ensure that you stay in control of your development process. That's something that I've kind of migrated or changed to over the course of time, so that they can always feel like there's a connection, if you will, between their organization and mine in terms of who they want to get this information. Quite candidly, sometimes it's the person who signs the contract. In some cases, it may be a VP of HR, or it may be a general manager, or maybe a VP of sales. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to understand that we're going to do everything in our power to really make a strong connection here. This is not just sign a document and then kind of get out of town. What's the anticipated timeline, including the length of sessions? If we're going to use customized materials such as the LMS and so on, giving them the option to put their logo on it. And then I kind of walk them through the individual sessions, again, kind of building in the personal and professional action plan things so that they see how everything is really kind of integrated. The investment requirements that I use are different than the standard. Let me give you a second to go ahead and read through that so you can see the difference. That's interesting. Now I'm not purposely blanking this out here. I'm going to attempt to stop share and reshare and see if I can just reestablish that document for you. There you go. The money back guarantee came back in 1985 on my very, very first client. A guy by the name of Dick Schroed looked right at me and said, "So how many of these things have you done?" And I said, "None." And he literally sat back in his desk chair like this and he said, "So I'm your guinea pig, am I?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Well, that's got to be worth something." And I said, "Dick," I said, "if it doesn't work," I said, "I'll give you all your money back except for what I paid for the materials. Is that fair enough?" And he literally sat up in his chair and he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah. Would you like to know why?" He said, "If you don't mind telling me." I said, "Dick, if we can't do what we're telling you we can do, we shouldn't be taking your money in the first place. We shouldn't be practicing at your expense." And he said, "Are you willing to put that in writing?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "We'll find a way to do business together." Well, that first group of 11 here in my own town of Cranford led to about 35 in Lancaster, PA. That led to 25 or 28 down in Husky, North Carolina. And that led to me doing a strategic planning program with a different company up in North Jersey, all because I was willing to put my money where my mouth is. I'm not the only person who's been the beneficiary of that. Many of you may know Mike Sleppen from my organization, who, by the way, just celebrated his 88th birthday on Saturday. And he was talking about what he asked a company president. He said, "So why did you do business with us?" And he said, "I didn't think you guys were in the business of picking up checks on Monday and returning them on Friday, so you must be pretty good at what you do." So that's just a different perspective on that. So that's basically one of the longer forms if I need to go there. Let me contrast that with something that's a little bit shorter. And this is kind of the coaching that I'm going to do for executive leadership or executive leaders. Just some of this came right out of some of the languaging that David Herdlinger used and shared and do a lot that way. Again, I've kind of tweaked some of it for my own use. Kind of what is it? The various roles. I've done some minor editing on that, but you can kind of see what's in it. Kind of the process, the benefits, the outcomes, the investments, and then what to expect from me as a coach. And again, I've tweaked that a little bit, based on my own languaging. Taking it to something that's even shorter is a memo of understanding on sales development. This happens to be a client I'm currently working with. I anticipate us working together as follow. Again, memo of understanding. We're usually weekly and then bi-weekly. You're going to ask to complete assessments and assignments. I build in the advanced insights. I include the bucks. And again, I had talked with them all through the learning methodology while I was in the office so that there was no surprises on that one. And on this particular one, I'm not only including kind of the content, but knowing that this is going to be an LMS process. And because I'm not planning on giving them guide to weeks, I let the client self-manage on that one. I include in the parentheses where they're going to find it in the LMS process. That just saves me having to send out a second document. They've got it once and done. So I have that. As you'll notice, I've also taken a slightly different tactic, and I've created languaging here. So let me just give you a chance to, some of these you're going to recognize, some of these have kind of come out of my own head over the years. But just take a moment, if you will, to read these one sentence intros to each section.
Doug, would you also send what is like the precursor for the next week's session in addition to this, or would this cover everything as a guide for this?
That's going to cover everything.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do in the sentence that kind of that's before the actual content is I'm really trying to paint a picture, an emotional picture of what it's going to be like for them to go through that section. I'm really trying to have them paint themselves into what it's going to be like for us to work together. over the years, I've kind of moved to that philosophy rather than just having bullets, because I find that there's not enough differentiation between the bullets and what other people say they do. So I really try to use this to almost to create a flavor for why we're going to be different than some of the other things that they may be talking to, people that they could be talking to. Excuse me. And again, I can send these to trusted advisors in case anybody wants them.
I would love one.
You know that's going to cost you gin and tonic at a power summit, right?
Well, wait a second, because here's my dirty little secret. While you're talking, I keep reaching for my Bud Light. I'm on vacation right now. See the palm trees?
Wait a minute, I'll have to, wait a minute, let me get.
There they are, right there.
Ah, you are.
All
I love it.
right, good. The cat's out of the bag now.
There you go. By the way, this applies to us. Always remember, you're not in the proposal writing business. You're supposed to be in the business of getting more loyal customers and expanding your revenues. So that's kind of the man behind the curtain on that. And then what you're going to see is actually a sanitized, real live guts of a proposal that I did all the way back in 2003. And I'm just going to ask you guys to kind of hang on the ride with me. But I really wanted to demonstrate how much information you really can get in an hour and a half of intense fact finding. And so again, using the balanced scorecard as buckets for the fact finding. Here we go. So I included information on the general background. Let me give you a chance just to kind of let your eyeballs go through that. And then how this kind of plays out from a financial point of view. And again, none of what you're reading here is editorial. All of this came from the mouth of the person I was talking to. So when he said this compares very favorably, he said that came up as part of our discussion. Compared to my competition, I'm doing so much better when it comes to turnover. As we think about the STAR model, this is the structure of the organization. The God's honest truth is when I walked him through this, he said, what's amazing to me is you know more about the organization than most of the people that work here. This is not a chain-driven business, meant that it was not typically operating the way a chain store would, because of the way they basically sell through individual salons.
I love your verbiage and use of perceived lack of.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to avoid parent-child language wherever I can. Any way that I can turn that into adult to adult, that, all I'm doing is playing back what you told me. I'm not trying to stick a sharp stick in your eye. Then I'm basically approaching it from their customer and customer base perspective. And then finally, the innovation and growth. Now, I took those and I started to ask additional questions about, talk to me about, again, this had all been part of the real-time fact finding that I did. And I took his answers and I put them into buckets in terms of financial, what was his goals and objectives from a financial perspective, from a management perspective, from a customer perspective, and from a growth perspective. So that what I was really trying to do there was really convey to him that I really understood what it was like to be him. That's really what I was trying to convey there, big time. Now, this next piece, yeah, the success formula, this is the old version. But what I wanted to do here was tie our approach specifically into what his management goals and his background are. So facilitate an increase in the level of basic management skills and attitudes in order to. These are almost direct, this section right here are almost direct quotes that had come out of my conversation with him. I am not in the business of creative writing here. All I'm trying to do is really capture what people have already told me. Facilitate an increase in the basic selling skills and attitudes of the account execs in order to. Again, this comes right out of the fact finding. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to demonstrate that there's no ramps to nowhere here. That everything that they've told me, I'm trying to tie together in one package in terms of kind of how this is all going to play out. That I never want them guessing about how this is going to work. In our own success in sales chapter, somewhere around the 4th page, there's a line that says, sales are made because the customer clearly understands how his or her needs are going to be met. That to me is $1 million statement that we've built right into our own materials. Facilitate an increase in the basic customer service skills. Now, this is where hopefully I can say this in a way that's really going to be conveyed to you. This bolded statement here, and you're going to see several of them. This is a positive statement of the obstacles that were spoken about during our fact finding. Let me say that one more time. This is a positive statement about the obstacles that were spoken about. So he told me we were not getting the business results that I really think we should be getting. And therefore, to turn that from an obstacle into the future deliverable to achieve those business results, we're going to do a section on goal setting. We're going to do a section on decision making and problem solving. We're going to give people a chance to evaluate organizational strengths and weaknesses from a productivity and people. And literally, as I'm walking through this, I'm saying, do you concur that if we do these four things, that we can push the rock in terms of desired business results? Then he had almost specifically said to me that there was really a lack of management mindedness. He said at 5 o'clock, it's like somebody put a seat ejector in their desk chairs. It's like, they're out of here. He said, I really need people to kind of embrace the whole idea of they're no longer hourly, they've been promoted into management, and I need them to operate that way. So in order to develop management mindedness and fully taking advantage of the role or taking full ownership of the role, well, how about if we include things like understanding the role and functions of a successful supervisor and leading for results, giving them a chance to evaluate their position description and their productivity, and sitting down with whoever they report to make sure that that's all buttoned up, giving them a chance to plan out their own professional goals and quantifying organizational goals progress and sharing as part of this multi-week process, having everybody setting both a personal goal and a professional goal on a weekly basis, telling their peers what it is. And next week when they come back, it's like, okay, Robert, you said you were going to climb the Mississippi and sell $1 million worth of stuff. How'd you do? And all of a sudden you build that peer-to-peer, accountability in there. But you can also talk about, you can use that as a really effective tool to have people working on shared organizational goals. You know what? We don't execute the basics very much when it comes to kind of blocking and tackling. Well, how about if we include a section on understanding motivation, human motivation, and what it really means to develop your people? And, I kind of got the impression that performance appraisal was not really a strong suit as you and I were talking. So I've included something like that. And I got to admit, unless you tell me you don't want it, most organizations don't have a very good process when it comes to handling discipline and discussions about discipline. And oh, by the way, in our materials, we tie discipline into the root word disciple, which is basically somebody who follows the teachings of somebody else. So this is not about pain and suffering. This is all about redirection and growth. You know what? We're not very good in terms of communication. And God, our teamwork is like non-existent. Well, in order to develop communications and push the rock on cross-functional teams, I included a section here on communications and organizational communications, confidence, managing and controlling your use of time, or building teams. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. He was also interested in some areas about personal growth. And so I did include the understanding you and yourself and confidence and managing your use of time. Managing and growing and managing the customer base. This is almost straight out of the customer loyalty program. And combination of that and the steps of the sale from the selling process. In order to, he said, we're really struggling. We still don't have the name recognition and the reputation that we really want. And so I've included these kinds of things as part of fodder for discussion to be able to kind of make that work. If you think about this from a goals planning sheet model, in essence, what you see in the bolded font is really the equivalent of the obstacles as he was talking me through his current situation. And what I'd like you to think about is what's indented in terms of our content and our action plan items really become the solutions if we just laid it out in terms of a goals planning sheet, these become the obstacles, and these become the solution sets, is kind of what I was thinking about when I was building this.
And
So
all this came from your questionnaire sheet that you showed us earlier.
all of this came from just me having a conversation with people and continuing to mine kind of what the impacts of some of these things were, and really trying to get inside their head in terms of goals. So I was just trying to get more and more and more information, but literally everything that you see on this on these 6 pages came in an hour and a half conversation. So you can get it. I guess my point in showing you this is you can get a ton of information by at the risk of stating the obvious, listening, um, and then but really saying, hey, where do I want to go with this thing? And so yeah, I got to admit, I mean, by 2003 I had been in the business for 18 years or something like that, so discovery was not exactly a new term to me. But I'm not trying to break my arm patting myself on the back. I just wanted to give you an idea of, hey, this is a way that you can take the discovery process and putting it into a way that people can really say, wow, you were really paying attention to what we were doing, and you've given me solutions against my perceived obstacles, so that everything is really buttoned up and there's no so to speak, at the risk of stating the same thing again, there's no ramps to nowhere. Everything that is in here, because of a very, very specific reason. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I literally at this, I want to kind of open it up. So I'm going to encourage you guys to take yourselves off of mute, at this point, and kind of what questions do you have? Yep, Rob, go ahead. Robert?
I have one. I was talking with Wendy earlier today, and I'll keep this brief, but I felt the need to follow up with a little bit more of what we would be talking about. I get like interested eyes, but I don't get responses from letters I've sent. But I will get a response from a text message to make sure I had the right email address. So moving it through, I felt I needed to lay out 3 basic, very sort of purposely vague options for him. Now, I wonder, by looking at what you just shared with us, if it might be worthwhile to share excerpts of what you just showed us in order to get him to the table where we could have an hour and a half long discussion to really get deep and then produce a document like you just showed us. Does that make any sense as a sales tool?
What are you saying on the front end? And are you purely doing this to what degree are you doing this in a voice-to-voice conversation? To what degree are you doing it live at like a networking event? And to what degree are you sending out? Is this purely a response to a pre-approach letter, just to make sure that my head is in the game with you?
I had a meeting with someone and I got some information, mainly with the premise of having him help me find some other people in like-minded businesses to what he has, because I have a personal connection to this guy through somebody else.
Okay.
He's a nice person. He said, come on in, let's talk. I went through and he goes, hey, I got a guy. In fact, I have a couple people that could probably benefit from this, one in particular. So with that as a starting point, I wrote him back a thoughtful letter about how we might be able to get started. Then I followed up with another letter.
You wrote who back the letter?
The person I had the meeting with face to face.
Okay. The person who's going to be your referral source, so to speak.
Yeah, but I think that referral source is turning more into a live prospect for his own business because he expressed an interest while we were talking. So now that we've gone, all right, so a meeting, 2 letters later, or is it 3 now, I think. I wonder if the next step could incorporate some of what you just shared with us to show him the level of detail that we could be getting into.
One question that I would ask, are you familiar with DISC at all?
Yeah.
Make sure that whatever you're responding to, where do you see him on the DIS, even without a formal report behind you? Where do you see him on the DISC and make sure that you're managing what level of detail you think he would want to see that would be most helpful. Because one of the things, like the part of the reason why over the course of years I've developed different models is if I give somebody who's a high D a 17-page document, their head will explode. But if I give an engineer 2/3 of a page that says, we're going to do some secret stuff, you're going to love it, write me a check for 15 grand and we'll figure it out as we go, their head will also explode. So I need to be able to kind of match the buying style with what I'm giving them.
What's
But
interesting
the one
here,
question I do have,
yeah,
the one question I do have for you is when you're having the conversations with the person who's now in the process of turning into a client, are you getting into enough depth so that they're emotionally wanting to do business with you?
well, it's hard to say because I haven't had any real feedback on the letters I've sent him after the time we met initially.
Oh, so you've only met with them once.
I mean, face to face just once on this subject.
And what would it take for you to be able to get additional face-to-face meetings or a Zoom meeting versus just written correspondence back and forth?
I asked for a meeting in each of the letters to get more information.
And has that information been forthcoming?
No, because no, it has not yet.
So my question is, my thought is you may or may not have gotten to enough urgency in meeting number one that it's compelling for him to put you back on his calendar. It's really something that I watch our colleagues kind of struggle with, trying to make sure that they get enough meat in that first meeting so that people absolutely want to meet with you a second time. If we're doing this well, and there's no sarcasm in what I'm about to say, if we're doing this well, they want to meet with you even more than you want to meet with them. And I find that a lot of times people will have a lot of generic questions at the top, but they're in that first conversation, but they don't really go deep enough to really mine enough nuggets, if you will, to really build that business case. Just for purposes of illustration, if you follow me around on 500 sales calls, almost all of my first meetings are 90 minutes. I never, ever, ever ask for a 30-minute meeting because I don't feel like I can get into enough depth to create enough differentiation between what I'm doing and anything else. So that, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of my first take.
Yeah, that is helpful. And I think because the meeting morphed from referrals to live client or potential live client, it just didn't go it couldn't have gone as deep as I would have liked it to. So I'm looking for that deeper next conversation.
Yeah. I probably would have asked for that meeting right before I even left the first one. Say, wow, you've given me so much to think about. Would you have any problem with you and I meeting a second time and scheduling it right on the spot?
Yeah.
I try not to play. I really try to minimize the telephone tag up to and including if I go to a networking event and I think there's interest, I immediately say to somebody, you have your phone with you? And they go, yeah, why? I said, does it have a calendar in it? They say, yeah. I said, if you're open to it, can we just set a time? And I literally have my phone in my hand. And if they've got an iPhone, I ask them if they have AirDrop on, and I send them the information, and I send them. We book a time to meet right on the spot, because if they have AirDrop, it's an easy way of switching, exchanging contact information. I try to strike while the iron is hot. To me, all leads and prospects get cold at the speed of light, because everybody's just so preoccupied with everything today. That's part of my urgency is just really, really high.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
Yeah, Doug, I have one. This is Heather.
Hey.
How often do you get asked about pricing and fees and things in that initial meeting? And how do you respond to that since so much of what we do is so customized?
So there's two answers there. The first is I typically will bring it up late after I've established value. If somebody starts to ask me pricing early on, that is a huge red flag. Interestingly, and this is going to sound like BS, but it's really not, I almost never get asked pricing by a company president. I almost always get asked pricing by somebody in the middle of an organization because they have a budget. And as one of our colleagues, and it may have been Gottschall, it may have been a guy by the name of Tom Gibbons. I'd love to give credit where credit is really due, who said it first. But if a company president wants to do something, he or she basically calls their top team together and says, we need to do this, find the money, the meeting is over. So very, very, very seldom does a president have a budget on something. If I suspect that the dollars are going to be an issue, and like I said, after I've established an ROI to die for by asking questions, I'll say order of magnitude, we're probably looking at a range of blah, 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 blah. Is that something that you can handle? And if I get any kind of hesitation at all, I will say to them, would it be easier if I found a way to spread out the payments for you? And it's almost always, oh God, yeah. Say, well, okay. So let's say it was $15,000 just to pick a number. I'll say, as long as you're not going to propose $1 a year for 15,000 years, we could probably find a way to do business together. And they'll usually laugh. And it's like, yeah, we could. I said, so how many payments do you really think you're going to need? Well, can you do it in 3 or can you do it in 4? Sometimes if I'm doing an individual coaching thing, they may spread it out over 10 months. The God's honest truth is I have been burned so few times in 35 years of doing this. I'm not going to sweat it. And as soon as they pay the deposit, they've probably already covered whatever costs you're going to have in terms of materials for trusted advisors. So to me, it's like, guess what? It's going to be pretty nice to have money coming in 6 months or 8 months or 10 months from now as well. Last time I looked, I'm still going to be able to need to eat then too. So if I can do something to kind of help them out, the great majority of it tends to be 3 or 4 payments. I mean, sometimes I can do 2, 50% up front and 50% the balance halfway through. But I guess philosophically, and I know I'm not a 99 economic for those folks that are familiar with the values index. I got involved in this business in '85 to make a difference in people. And so if I can live with kind of spreading the payments out to help them out, so I get another client to work with, have fun with, and quite candidly get referrals from, I really do my damnedest to try to make that work. Heather, is that helpful at all?
Yep, very helpful. Thanks, Doug.
Anybody else make a comment? Good, bad, ugly. Is this what you wanted? Is this what you were hoping that I would cover? I guess as part of my
Yeah.
one of the questions.
Doug, just to add to your answer to Heather, if I'm ever questioned or I think the conversation is leaning toward asking how much I charge, my standard answer is always, I can't tell you that until I know how we're going to work together. So that kind of puts, and when we get to that point, your investment will be for the project. So that kind of puts a very large umbrella around it. So it delays the dollars question a little bit, and knows that, I have to go through more of the discovery process. So, that kind of makes people feel a little bit better.
Just to take Linda's answer and build on it one more piece, one word that I've eliminated from my vocabulary, and I would encourage you to eliminate it from yours, is the word customized. I'll only talk in terms of tailored.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is whenever I hear the word customized, all I think about is a million gazillion dollars and projects that go forever and ever and ever and don't work. Because the other thing that to me it always implies is if I'm giving you a customized solution, that may imply that it's never been done any place on the planet and now you're my guinea pig. Versus if I'm talking about, I'm going to tailor our solutions based on using elements of proven processes, you're not going to be taking a fly. I'm trying to convey to you that you're not going to be taking a flyer by doing business with us. So I got to admit, I kind of use language the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, very, very specifically and very much on purpose.
Doug, it's Matt. Thank you very much for sharing these thoughts. I got some nuggets out of that for myself, so thank you very much. I do, but something you said a while ago kind of sparked a question, which was you've been burned very few times. For the times that you've been burned, were there a commonality to those times? And if so, what were they?
Yeah. The commonality is that the person almost never followed through on anything in terms of their entire life. And this was no different.
So they really weren't committed to the thing from the very beginning.
They thought they were.
They thought they were, but they weren't.
They weren't.
And here they weren't.
Well, their philosophy was kind of like a bug on a lily pad. Well, I'm going to do this, and then they hop around, and they've always got a reason why they can't totally finish it. And then it's like you'll notice that, well, we got to delay this meeting, and then it delays, and well, I'm not really prepared. So it's almost like a kind of a cascading of delays and not being ready, and this is happening, and I'm getting pretty busy over here, and you really lose that really tight connection that you have. So in some cases, you can kind of see it coming.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it. I see we're up at 3:58. Are there any other last minute comments or thoughts or questions?
No, other than to say thank you.
You bet. Hope to see most of you guys at Power Summit either here in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months. Hope everybody stays healthy, and I wish you happy selling or happy assisted buying.
God, thank you.
Very good. Thanks again, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye-bye all.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.